Hey guys, this is the MMA breakdown back with predictions for UFC 199 Rockhold versus Bisping 2. Of course, as you guys know, Chris Weidman pulled out of the fight just a couple days ago, and Bisping is replacing him on short notice, and apparently has not even been training because he's been filming a movie. So the main event just doesn't do anything for me. We already saw how that fight went the first time, and I'll give my thoughts more in depth when we get to that fight. But overall, I still think it's a pretty good card, especially with the two title fights. The main card is pretty good, and there are even some good fights on the prelim card. So overall, I'm looking forward to it. I think it's a pretty solid card. All right, let's get started. I believe there are 4 UFC Fight Pass prelims. Wikipedia is not showing the breakdown for the card, and neither is UFC.com, but there are 13 fights, and with a 5-fight main card and 4-fight FS1 prelim card, that would leave the other 4 fights to be on UFC Fight Pass. So I think that's right, but the first fight. Oh, and follow me on Twitter. My link is in the description. I always live tweet during fights. And also, if you guys haven't checked out my predictions yet for Fight Night 88, Almeida versus Garbrandt, check those out. And that video will also be linked in the description. All right. A lightweight, Reyes versus Dong Hyun Kim. I actually rewatched both of their previous fights. I almost never do that, but I had some time, so I did. And I have to take Dong Hyun Kim here. And of course, it's not Stun Gun Kim, but another Chinese fighter named not Chinese. Is he Chinese? No, sorry, South Korean. Another fighter named Dong Hyun Kim. But I rewatched both of their previous fights, and Reyes was from tough Latin America too, and you can't discount any of those guys. There's some good talent coming out of that show. Yair Rodriguez and Alejandro Perez seems to be developing well. So don't count him out just because he's from that show. And I did like his win in his debut over Cesar Arzumendia. Showed pretty good boxing and seemed better defensively because he was dropped a couple of times in both of his fights in the house. His first fight he was dropped and came back to get the TKO stoppage win. And then his next fight against the finalist Horacio Gutierrez just got knocked out cold, I believe, in the first round. And didn't get dropped against Arzumendia, but it was a bit of a sloppy brawl. He did get taken down a couple of times, and the finish, he kind of caught Arzumendia slipping. It was off of a break. I think they were both standing up from a grappling exchange, and Reyes just kind of caught him with his hands down. Dong Hyun Kim, I think, just seems to have a bit of a more polished game. I think he seems more athletic. He lost to Dominique Steele in his debut. Got knocked out in the 3rd round off of a slam. But before that, he wasn't winning the fight. He was doing okay, but he really lost because of the physicality of Steele. He was able to take him down and hold him against the fence and beat him up in the clinch. And Kim did take some damage, but he was exchanging well in the clinch and seemed to have a more diverse striking arsenal than Reyes with kicks and knees from the clinch. So I like Kim here, considering Reyes' suspect chin, and just that I think Kim has a higher level MMA game than Reyes' previous opponent. So not a pick that I'm very certain about, but that's what I'm feeling. So I'm going to take Kim. I think he does have a chance to get a knockout win, but I'll take him by decision. All right, next up at middleweight, Kevin Casey versus Elvis Mutapcic. I like Casey here. Mutapcic got outpointed and out-wrestled badly by Francis Marbajoso in his last fight. And Casey, I don't think will be able to get the takedowns as easily as Barroso, but he is a guy who can get the fight to the ground, and from there he has decent control. Even did well against Rafael Natal early in the fight before getting TKO'd. Got some good strikes in on Natal. I think even dropped him, and he is a jiu-jitsu based fighter. So given that Mutapcic was dominated on the mat, seemed really out of his element there. I think Casey has the advantage on the mat. Casey is unathletic though. Seems like a somewhat immobile fighter, kind of foot slow and not a lot of hand speed on the feet. Did get the win against Ildemar Alcantara where he was able to control him and drag him down. Other than that, nothing too meaningful. I don't really know anything about Mutapcic's game. I only saw his fight against Francimar Barroso. So if Casey can't get it to the ground, then I don't really know what's going to happen on the feet. But I think I assume he'll be able to. So I'm gonna take Casey. I'll say by decision. He did pound out. Was it Bubba Bush? I think. But who knows? I'll take Casey by decision. All right, next up at light heavyweight, Jonathan Wilson versus newcomer Luis Henrique da Silva. Jonathan Wilson had a knockout win over Chris Dempsey last August. Feels like a lot longer than that to me, just from when I thought he had last fought. But I remember him. I remember being impressed by his athleticism and his power. I think he knocked him out only a minute into the fight. And Chris Dempsey, he's not a high level opponent. He's not a good fighter. But yeah, Da Silva, don't know him, so we're gonna have to move on. All right, at welterweight, Sean Strickland versus Tom Breese. This is a good fight, an interesting matchup, and I'm gonna take Strickland. Tom Breese had that really great performance against Cathal Pendred, where he showed really good boxing, looked really fluid with his hands, great counter punching. But then his last fight against Guida Nakamura really showed that he's still pretty green. Won the fight, even had, I think, a reverse triangle choke at one point on the ground. So you still saw flashes of skill and talent from him there in that fight, but was put in some bad positions on the ground. I think Nakamura, I can't remember if he had his back or had him in mount, but I do remember that I was not impressed that Breese was put in some bad positions in that fight. Strickland, I think something that might be a disadvantage for him in this fight is that he's not a high-volume striker. Breese against Pendred, had really good combinations, but Strickland seems very composed, almost to a fault. Against Alex Garcia, wasn't doing a whole lot early on, but really bided his time and put him away in that third round. And he's decent everywhere. Not a great wrestler, but controlled Igor Araujo, who's a jiu-jitsu fighter. Controlled him for a decision and game planned really well against Luke Barnett. He was able to actually out-jab the taller fighter. And Breese, to me, he seems more of a counter fighter. Luis Dutra was also able to put pressure on him early before getting knocked out. I think Strickland's going to come in having done his homework, having put together a good game plan, and I think he'll be able to outpoint Breese, at least stay out of danger and maybe drag this to the ground. And again, from there, Breese, I think, does have some good submission skills, but Strickland just seems kind of more, has better fundamentals everywhere, and it has more of a, more of a process based fighter. So I like Strickland in this fight. I have a feeling that performance against Pendred, might have been because Pendred was really an opponent that Breese could look good against. Not that he's not talented or bad. I mean, he still showed really great counter boxing that fight, but I think Strickland is a step up, a huge step up from Pendred, and he's looked good lately. So I like Strickland here to win a decision. All right, next up at women's strawweight, Jessica Penne versus Jessica Andrade. And I like Penne here. Andrade, I was high on her early in her UFC career, but I think it's just really been exposed over her last couple of fights. Has not been looking good, even against weak competition. The Sarah Morris fight was winning, but nearly gave it away at the end. Had her back taken standing, and had to fight off had to survive a choke attempt. And then against Marion Renault, dropped her, but followed up and got submitted with a triangle. And then against Rockhold Pennington, I think Pennington, can't remember if she hurt her on the feet or just dragged her down, but submitted her in the second round. So I think she's kind of been exposed on the ground. She can be beaten there, and Penny's a great grappler. She really gave Miranda Marcos a lesson in grappling. Marcos was the better wrestler and even hit some takedowns in that fight, but Penne was able to mount her and just had the better grappling and pounded on her in that fight. And she survived almost 4 rounds with Jędrzejczyk. I mean, was just getting battered for that entire fight, but it was a lot better than Carla Esparza did. And it's been a while. That was in June when she lost to Jędrzejczyk, but I think Penne's a solid fighter, a good grappler. Maybe has a ways to go with her striking, but Andrade just has not been looking really consistent, even against not great competition, and she's been weak on the ground. So I like Penne to be able to take her down. And Andrade also looks to tie up with her opponents and drag it to the ground. So from there, I think Penne has the advantage and will just be the better grappler, outposition her, and I'll go with Penne for a decision. But I wouldn't be too surprised if she's able to sink in a choke, get her in mount, maybe pound her out. I like Penne here. All right, next up at lightweight, Beneil Dariush versus James Vick. This might be one of the most intriguing fights on the entire card. Really love this one. Was even looking forward to the initial matchup, Dunham versus Vick, but this is obviously a lot better. Very interesting. I think a lot of people are really going to rush to take Vick here just because of his recent success. His win over Glyco Franca. And Dariush, just had a pretty surprising and disappointing loss to Chiesa. But from that fight against Franca, I think 2 things were very clear that Vick still struggles with. Guys who can, throw big shots, kind of big overhand looping shots down the middle, and guys who can close distance and take him down. Franca hit some takedowns, and he was a jiu-jitsu fighter, and Vick did well on the ground. He's really long and seemed to improve his defensive grappling off of his back, was able to get back to his feet. Seemed to improve there from some of his previous fights. And on the feet, also looked a lot sharper. His fight with Volmir Lazaro, I thought his striking was pretty sloppy, but his striking really looked sharp, really used his length well in that Franca fight, but was still tagged a couple of times. And Dariush, even though the way he lost to Chiesa was pretty disappointing, I thought his striking just looked better than ever in that fight early on. It looked crisp, he was fast, landing those big overhand shots. And I think Vick's going to struggle with that here. He does have the length, but Dariush looked like a high-level Muay Thai striker in that fight against Chiesa. So I think Dariush has the advantage there. The fight against Nick Hein, Vick was dropped a couple of times, and from there he was put in a crucifix position on the ground. I actually thought Hein kind of got robbed in that fight. So I think Dariush has a chance to drop him on the feet. And on the ground, Dariush is still a superb grappler. I mean, any of his submission wins from Crookshank to who's the other guy? Yeah, Crookshank, and has a couple of other submission wins, not against great guys, but totally dominated Jim Miller on the mat. and Carlos Diego Ferreira, who's a good grappler, did get taken out by Chiesa, but Vick, at least we haven't seen it from him, but he hasn't taken the back, I don't think, in any of his UFC fights or on Tough. His submissions come from that guillotine off of takedown attempts, and I think that's a harder move to land on a guy like Dariush, who's a really good grappler. I don't think Vick's going to take his back like Chiesa did, and on the ground I see Dariush just I see him controlling him. I think Vick could get back to his feet, but I think Dariush is better than Glyco Franca, and Vick's been controlled by Nick Hein, like I mentioned. So I like Dariush here. I like him to win a decision. I don't think Vick can stop Dariush on the feet. I think he can get some good shots in, and he's always a threat to hit that power guillotine, but I think Dariush is going to be savvy enough to stay out of that and be able to secure the takedown and control him. So I like Dariush. All right, next up at featherweight, Brian Ortega versus Clay Guida. Clay Guida, man, he's over the hill and probably should have been retired for, his retirement is overdue, I think. But got to take Ortega here. Young guy climbing up through the ranks, has been super impressive over his last couple of fights. And Clay Guida was submitted very easily in his last fight against Thiago Tavares in the first round. First takedown he attempted early in the fight. Tavares locked up that guillotine, and that was it. So Guida tries to wrestle, which I think he has to. That's just how he's always fought. I think Ortega is going to be able to lock something up real easily. This guy's a very special submission artist and a grappler, very good off of his back. If Guida doesn't want to take him down at all, that could be more interesting. I don't know who would have the striking advantage. I mean, Guida's not a good or a technical striker, but we haven't really seen too much from Ortega on the feet either. I'd probably still give Ortega the advantage on the feet, though. I mean, he was hanging with Tavares in that fight. But Ortega can get it to the ground as well. Was down 2 rounds against Brandao, and in that third round needed the finish. He was very aggressive going after him, pulled guard, and got the anaconda choke. If he needs to get to the ground against Guida, I don't think he'll have a problem doing that. So I really like Ortega here. No reason to take Guida, really. So Ortega by... I'll say first round submission, maybe second round, but I really think Ortega should be a big favorite here, and he will be one of my most confident picks on this card, which I will list those after I give all my predictions. All right, next up at featherweight, BJ Penn versus Cole Miller. I'm going to take BJ Penn here, but I think this fight is almost a complete coin flip, especially considering just Penn's age, his inactivity, and how terrible he looked in his last fight against Edgar. And of course, Miller's not Edgar, but I do think just given the layoff and given how old Penn is at this point, 37, that combined with the inactivity, I think that could be enough for Miller to just squeak out a decision. But for me, what's preventing me from taking Miller is that the guy's just always been super inconsistent. Looked amazing against Sam Cecilio, where he showed a great jab, dropped him on the feet and then submitted him on the ground. But over the years, this guy's been outboxed by Steven Seiler coming off of Tough, outboxed by Nam Phan. And, he dropped a round to Andy Ogle, couldn't submit him on the ground. Lost a decision to Manny Gamburian. And there was another fight I wanted to mention, I think. No, I think that's it. But, yeah, it's the last fight against Jim Ehlers. I don't remember him looking particularly impressive before the eye poke. So a super inconsistent guy, and a guy who's been outboxed again by Nam Phan and Steven Seiler. if BJ Penn, I'm taking Penn, but it's contingent upon Penn, really having prepared well, having taken training seriously. The word out on the street, at least, what I've heard is that Penn, especially in that Rory McDonald fight, was not training seriously. His training was not up to par for an elite MMA fighter. With the move to Jackson's, and if Penn's really motivated and training seriously, I think he can get himself in shape and to a point where he can beat Cole Miller. And Penn does have that aggressive forward style, like Fan and Seiler used to outbox Miller. So I think Penn can do that. Even when he lost to Nick Diaz, still took that first round. I think Penn can do it again if he does those things, if he's prepared well. I think Miller's length might be a problem. If Penn's cardio is terrible, then I would expect Miller to start to pull away late. And on the ground, I wouldn't say that Miller has much of an advantage. Definitely not if we're talking about prime Penn, but right now I still think Penn would have the advantage. Again, Miller, couldn't submit Ogle, was out wrestled by Gamburian, so I'm taking Penn, but really too close to call. I think we just don't know how Penn's going to show up, but I'm going to take Penn to win a decision. All right, now on to the main card. Those are all the last 4 fights were what I'm assuming FS1 prelims. I don't think I mentioned that, but now we're on to the main card. At lightweight, Dustin Poirier versus Bobby Green. I'm taking Poirier here. Bobby Green's a good fighter. I don't see any way he wins this. I don't think he has the power to hurt Poirier, and Poirier's just been looking spectacular since the move to lightweight. His power has really been enhanced. Showed a really good wrestling game in his last fight against Joe Duffy, and we haven't seen it at lightweight yet, but at featherweight, where I thought he was an elite fighter, he was very good, had good submission skills. So Green, he's got a funky kind of boxing style, odd timing that's given some guys problems, but I don't see him winning the fight, and he hasn't fought since November of 2014, so he's coming back from a long layoff. Poirier's been doing really well. I like Poirier. I think he probably hurts him on the feet, maybe submits him on the ground. I'm going to take a Poirier, definitely. Not sure by finish or decision. I think I'm probably leaning finish, so I like Poirier big here. All right, next up in middleweight, Dan Henderson versus Hector Lombard. This is a sad, ugly matchup. Henderson should have retired 3 years ago after the first loss to Vitor Belfort. He should have hung it up then, but I'm still kind of looking forward to seeing this because it's just going to be crazy, and someone's definitely going out, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be Henderson, but should be an entertaining fight. It'll be very sad to see, but whatever. I'm taking Lombard. I think Henderson is not going to be able to, keep Lombard at distance. Lombard, I think, will really be able to close distance with ease, like he's done to Marquardt and Husamar Palhares. Also important to note that this is Lombard's return to middleweight after having had, I think, 4 or so fights at welterweight. And Henderson's chin is just terrible. It really is. It's been ugly to see this guy get KO'd so many times by Mousasi and Belfort twice. Even in the Hua fight, he was hurt badly and dropped a couple times. For Henderson to win, he's going to have to connect first, and he's going to need time to land that knockout punch. And I think Lombard's just going to be the first one to close distance. I think both guys are going to go right at each other, and from there, I don't think Henderson can trade in the pocket like Lombard can. if Lombard somehow, by some miracle, doesn't finish Henderson in the first round, then and if he starts to gas, then everything changes. If he starts to slow down, and we have seen him, in the Josh Bergman fight, wasn't able to put him away, and that went the distance. Still beat up Bergman, but I think Henderson would have a better chance to land that knockout strike at that point. But even with Lombard looking really bad against Magny last fight, outside of that first round, Henderson's just been hurt so many times over the last few years, especially the Mousasi fight. I mean, when has Mousasi been a one-punch knockout artist? Never. So I think Lombard's going to do to Henderson what he did to Magny in that first round, but finish it. So I definitely like Lombard here. I don't see it at all for Henderson. All right, next up at featherweight, I said that Dariush versus Vick was the most intriguing fight, but I think this one takes it for me, actually. Max Holloway versus Ricardo Lamas, and everyone's going to take Holloway. I know he's going to be a big favorite. I think the fight's a lot more complicated than that, and I love Holloway. I've been super high on this guy from the beginning. Picked him to beat McGregor. I mean, you can go watch that video on my channel and just listen to the things that I said about Holloway, how special I think the guy is. And I am going to pick Lamas, and that's not to say that I think Holloway's overrated or is not a great fighter. Even if he lost this fight, I still think he could be a potential future champion. But I just think Lamas' wrestling, that's something that Holloway has not faced in the UFC at all. I mean, let's just pull up his record here. Jeremy Stevens, Charles Oliveira, and we didn't even see that fight go to the ground at all against Oliveira. Swanson, Cole Miller, Corsani, Collard, Feely, Bermudez, who did get him down, and we'll talk about that. Chope, Garcia, Justin Lawrence, Schilling, and his first fight against Poirier, where he was taken down and submitted. So none of those guys are really solid wrestlers. I mean, a few of them are good wrestlers, Poirier and Bermudez. And Bermudez, he had a round in that fight where he took him down and really pounded on him. And Holloway lost that fight. I thought he got robbed. I thought he still should have won against Bermudez. But I think Lamas is a better wrestler than any of those guys, and he uses his wrestling a lot more, and that's just something that Holloway hasn't faced, and I think he's going to struggle with it. I think Lamas is going to be able to take him down if he's smart. Also, on the feet, I think Lamas, he has really solid boxing. He has good combinations. We saw that in his last fight against Sanchez. He's a hard puncher, can do damage. This guy put away Dennis Bermudez with a jab, and that's a guy who had some success, at least in one round, against Holloway. So I think he's going to have more success and do a lot better on the feet than a lot of other opponents have done against Holloway. And also, Holloway has had a couple fights, the last fight against Stevens and the Cole Miller fight where while he's clearly winning and outpointing them, he doesn't really do much to hurt them. And if he can't hurt Lamas early, then I really think Lamas can impose the wrestling. I think he has good combinations. If it stays on the feet, I would probably give Holloway the advantage there, definitely. And we saw against Jose Aldo, Lamas was really just stuck. He couldn't do anything. But then again, Aldo didn't really do anything to hurt him in that fight. But the point is, if it stays on the feet, then yes, I would definitely favor Holloway. But I really think Lamas will be able to take him down. And again, that's just it's a style that he has not faced in the UFC. And Lamas, he's lost the big fight a couple of times. He's lost to Chad Mendez, and he's faced Aldo, and those are not guys that Holloway has faced. So I like Lamas for the upset win here. I know it's an unpopular pick, and my upset picks have been very questionable lately. But that's what I'm seeing in the matchup. I still think Holloway's a superb talent, and again, if Lamas can't take him down, then yes, Holloway should win. He might even be able to hurt him, but I like Lamas's chances to take him down and rough him up on the ground. He's got really good ground and pound, and again on the feet, I think he's a more comfortable striker, has better boxing than a lot of the other guys Holloway has faced. So I'm going to take Lamas to win a decision. All right, and on to the 2 title fights, which at this point I think are just completely lopsided fights. Both of them probably some of the biggest lopsided fights in UFC history. Weidman versus Rockhold. I was going to take Weidman probably, and I took Rockhold to beat him the first time, which I got a lot of crap for. But I think these fights are totally one-sided. But anyways, at bantamweight, for the bantamweight belt, Cruz versus Faber. I think Cruz is just going to run circles around Faber. I've been saying this for the last couple of years for every Faber fight I've predicted. After that McDonald win, where he looked great, and he had a great year that year, and then he faced Barao on short notice and just got ran over. Ever since that Barao loss, he's just been looking worse and worse with each fight, and he's still gotten some finishes in there. But even the Bruce Leroy fight, where he just kind of willed his way to a finish, eventually, Bruce Leroy was getting to him on the feet, making him uncomfortable, landing some shots, and Faber looked kind of stuck, like he didn't have an answer, and didn't really return much on the feet. The Rivera fight, I thought he definitely lost that first round, or did it end in the first round? I can't remember. And then the second round, I thought he definitely lost that first round. His takedowns weren't working. He couldn't get anything going on the feet, and one off of an eye poke. The Edgar loss, he couldn't do anything. And then most recently against Frankie Saenz, I actually thought he was really lucky to win a decision there. Saenz kicked his legs to death. I mean, it was like a poor man's version of the Aldo fight. And Faber just looked slow, and other than landing these huge haymakers, he really didn't have much in that fight. I think had a guillotine attempt early, but barely got by Frankie Saenz. So I think at this point, Faber is just maybe not a shell of himself, but athletically, I think he's a greatly reduced version of what he used to be. I think his striking has really deteriorated over the years, his technical striking. Now it's just he tries to land those big bombs, puts everything into them, and doesn't have a functional striking game. You go back and look at the Eddie Wineland fight where he was using more of a jab, using better combinations, finding openings. It just seems like his striking's really deteriorated. So Cruz, having that really great comeback win over Dillashaw, was a close fight. Took some damage, but I thought for the most part he was able to evade a lot of Dillashaw's strikes, and he was able to catch Dillashaw on the counter a lot of times, and he still has that elusive style, that great footwork. So I don't see Faber being able to get a hold of him. In their first fight, Faber did drop him a couple of times, but that was about it. Cruz still outpointed him, hit some takedowns. I think Cruz is just going to be way too fast at this point. I think now he has a big athletic advantage, which wasn't as big the first time, but now definitely is. And I just see Faber being too slow, too immobile, not being able to get his hands on Cruz, not being able to make it a brawl like he wants to, and how he did in the first fight. I think Cruz just picks him apart, and I honestly wouldn't even be surprised if Cruz could get a finish late in this fight if he just, leg kicks Faber and, hits him with that jab and counters him for 3 or 4 rounds a lot and just accumulates damage on him. I think he could get a late finish, but I'm going to take Cruz by decision. I think it's going to be completely one-sided, so I really like Cruz in this fight. Just look at that Faber versus Saenz fight and ask yourself if you really think that guy can even be competitive with Cruz. All right, next up at middleweight for the middleweight title, the main event, Luke Rockhold versus Michael Bisping. I don't have anything to say about this fight. I mean, I feel like telling you to watch my prediction video for the first fight, and I called it exactly how it went down. I said Rockhold would hurt Bisping on the feet and submit him on the ground. That's exactly what happened. And the only thing that's changed is that Bisping has gotten older, and he's been able to win some fights. He's, I think, had to improve a bit tactically and technically a little bit to, get those wins. But he's definitely lost athleticism and really seems to be in trouble whenever someone rushes him and puts volume and heat on him. But I think the only thing that's changed is Bisping has gotten older and Rockhold has gotten a lot better. Yeah, I really don't know what else to say. The only way Bisping can win is if he keeps this fight on the feet for 5 minutes and manages to not get hurt by Rockhold on the feet, but not get taken down as well, which I think is just going to be impossible to do. I mean, Rockhold doesn't have the hands maybe that Bisping has, but I think he makes up for that in his ability to do damage on the feet. Not just with his kicks, but even in the Machida fight, it wasn't a clean punch, but still wobbled Machida, dropped him, and from there just dominated him on the mat. And, I can't think of anything else to say. We already saw this fight not too long ago, and Rockhold should just do the same. Bisping's a good kickboxer, and I was even impressed that he was able to get the win against Silva. I thought he'd lose that fight. Did drop Silva in that fight, but he's not going to drop Rockhold. Rockhold is way too good with his kicks and finding openings and really being patient. And then on the ground, he is just a monster, both with his positional grappling and then with his submissions as well. So definitely taking Rockhold. I think he gets it done in pretty much the same way. Either takes down Bisping or drops him. I'd say within the first 3 rounds. And gets the submission. So I'm going to take Rockhold by second round submission, which I think is exactly what happened the first time. So, yeah, Rockhold by second round sub. All right, guys, that's it for my UFC 199 predictions. Thank you for watching. Again, don't forget to follow me on Twitter, link in the description. And also check out my predictions for UFC Fight Night 88, Almeida versus Garbrandt. The UFC summer rolls on, and next up I will have predictions for Fight Night McDonald versus Thompson, which, well, at least the main and co-main events are pretty good. The rest of the card is not, but we'll be back. I'll be back soon with predictions for that event. Thanks, guys. Take care. I'll see you next time. Bye.